G'day, May 40 here. So I like Tucker Carlson, but he is frequently the height of irresponsibility. He often has terrible judgment. He frequently says the most ridiculous, stupid things. And maybe he just can't handle the freedom of being out on his own without self-destructing. I mean, Tucker Carlson's incredibly influential. He probably had a great deal to do with the United States not bombing Iran when Donald Trump was president. He probably had a great deal to do with J.D. Vance becoming vice president. Probably had a great deal to do with getting Robert F. Kennedy to endorse Donald Trump. So I'm on board with all of those things, but I hate his anti-vax agenda. I hate just the careless way that he does things. And now he's really topped himself, right? Promoting Darryl Cooper, right? Household name, Darryl Cooper. Maybe the best and most honest popular historian in the United States. His latest project is the most forbidden of all, trying to understand World War II. How is trying to understand World War II forbidden? That's crazy talk, all right? And so let's get some analysis here on what's going on with Tucker Carlson. And one thing that I loathe that Tucker Carlson embodies and a bunch of other people around the distant right embody is this knee-jerk contrarianism, that if the establishment says X, then the truth must be Y. Not so true.
Actually quite serious. Tucker Carlson put this guy.
All right, this is Michael Duran from Israel Update. He hosts a show with Gadi Taub, an Israeli historian.
On, who I think has been on a show before. His name's Darryl Cooper. He's got a Twitter feed called Martyr Made and a Substack called Martyr Made. And Tucker Carlson heralded him. The dumbest take is that Tucker Carlson heralded him as the finest historian of our age. Look, in short, Darryl Cooper's an anti-Semite. And he's getting more and more play, not just from Tucker. Darryl Cooper has a relationship with this guy, Jocko.
Okay, I don't care if Darryl Cooper's an anti-Semite, right? All I'm interested in is, does he have important, interesting things to say? Unfortunately, the answer is no. So too with Curtis Yarvin, right? Curtis Yarvin makes all these wildly hyperbolic pronouncements that are frequently far removed from reality. He has an exorbitant, unqualified faith in the righteousness of his own opinion. And Jocko Willink, this guy is just like Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, but for men, right? We're talking Joe Rogan tier idiocy.
Jocko has a podcast which has millions of followers. Jocko is a former Navy SEAL. He's got Jocko's has got a whole business complex. He's got his podcast. He's got a motive.
Right. I've had dozens of anti-Semites on my show. I have no problem listening to anti-Semites. Sometimes they have wise or funny or interesting things to say. Right. It's the shoddy mediocrity of Darryl Cooper that gets me, and then Tucker Carlson promoting him as this great historian.
Motivational speakers series. He's got a up in Maine. He has lifestyle. He sells a lifestyle company. I don't know what they sell. I didn't look at it, but maybe hunting knives and power drinks, because Jocko's in very good shape. He also teaches martial arts and managerial techniques, because he's been a Navy SEAL out managing men in war, and motivational speaker, but also how to kill people in an alley, and how to rip their lungs out with a pencil, that kind of thing. So then you buy his power drinks. But Jocko is a phenomenon. I mean, Piers Morgan had him on his show to explain Gaza to the masses. Because why does Jocko know about Gaza? Because Jocko's been a soldier, pointing his machine gun at nasty characters. So Jocko sometimes co-hosts another podcast with this guy, Darryl Cooper. They had, for example, they brought on guys from the survivors from the USS Liberty, which is an American ship that was bombed by the Israelis in 1967, which proves that Israel is an unreliable ally, and so on and so forth. It's a favorite episode, favorite issue of every anti-Semite out there, to explain why Israel is really anti-American and we shouldn't have anything to do with it. So Jocko plays footsie, even a little bit more than footsie with Darryl Cooper. So does Tucker. So does a guy I know pretty well, Sagar and Jetty. And they're all in the same. They're all
How about
trying to.
Candace Owens?
Candace Owens also. Candace Owens has gone of all of these guys. If I rank them in terms of levels of anti-Semitism, there's Candace Owens, like crazy, batshit crazy anti-Semitism, and then Darryl Cooper is batshit crazy anti-Semitism, but masquerading as serious scholarship. There's a lot of his tone. There's a lot of really of reading behind what he's doing, and a historical argumentation, and a tone of I'm just a serious investigator. Nobody thinks Candace Owens is a serious investigator, right? But Darryl Cooper sounds to the uninitiated like he's a guy who's being very judicious. And before I say any more, why don't we just play the clip? Can we do that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Is that, oh, you're saying Churchill was the chief villain, therefore his enemies, Adolf Hitler and so forth, were
Stalin,
the protagonists, right?
Yeah.
They're the good guys if you think he's a villain. That's not the case. That's not what I'm saying. Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth, that they were going to have to handle.
And that's just nonsense. It's not that they were unprepared. There was no Geneva Convention signed on by the Soviet Union, so Nazi Germany had no intention of housing and sustaining and feeding millions of Russian prisoners. All right. The Nazis treated Allied prisoners according to the Geneva Conventions, right? Even Allied Jewish prisoners were overwhelmingly treated according to the Geneva Conventions. But with regard to the Soviets, it's not that the Nazis just got overwhelmed by millions of them. The Nazis were deliberately fighting a war of extermination with the Soviets. They were not fighting a war of extermination with France and with Holland and with England and with the United States.
Well, they went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You have like letters as early as July, August 1941 from commandants of these makeshift camps that they're setting up for these millions of people who are surrendering or people they're rounding up. And so it's 2 months after, a month or two after Barbarossa was launched. And they're writing back to the high command in Berlin saying, we can't feed these people. We don't have the food to feed these people. And one of them actually says, rather than wait for them all to slowly starve this winter, wouldn't it be more humane to just finish them off quickly now? And so this is like 2 months into the invasion, right? And like my view on this, I argue with my Zionist interlocutors about this all the time with regard to the current war in Gaza. Look, man, like maybe you, as the Germans, you felt like you had to invade to the east. Maybe you thought that Stalin was such a threat, or that if he launched a surprise attack and seized the oil fields in Romania, that you would now not have the fuel to actually respond, and you'd be crippled, and all of Europe would be under threat, and whatever it was, that like maybe you thought you had to do that. But at the end of the day, you launched that war with no plan to care for the millions and millions of civilians and prisoners of war that were going to come under your control. And
okay, this is a ridiculous point. All right, Israel is not deliberately putting the people of Gaza in chimneys. Right, Israel is not deliberately pulling out thousands of people from Gaza and then machine gunning women and children to death. Right, Israel is taking fairly effective measures to minimize civilian casualties while fighting a war against Gaza's controlling military authority, Hamas. But he really wants to make that equivocation, right? I mean, I don't care if he's anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, anti-Churchill. I don't care if he's pro-Nazi, pro-Germany, pro-Hitler, right? But when he starts lying, then that's where I don't have any patience for him.
millions of people died because of that.
So, Gotti, in this clip, what we saw, it's not too much of an exaggeration to say that Darryl Cooper said two things. One, the Holocaust was not planned. It's just sort of accidental, sort of bad management of detainees by the.
It was a coup de grace. It was a favor they did, so the Jews don't have to starve.
Yeah, humanitarian
executions.
Humanitarian executions, and then secondly. He also says that Churchill's war was propelled by his well-heeled Jewish supporters, his war effort. And you have to understand that this is part of a larger argument that Churchill tricked the United States to fight his war for him. It's not too much of an exaggeration to then say the elders of Zion activated or deployed to Churchill to pull the Americans.
Now, if there was considerable evidence on this behalf, I don't care how anti-Jewish or how that plays into anti-Semitic tropes. If it's true, it's true. The problem with Darryl Cooper is he just lies. And then Tucker calls him this great historian.
Into this unnecessary European war that has nothing to do with the United States. Now, this group that I'm talking about, Darryl Cooper, Martyr Made, I've been following him for a little while because I started to realize when I saw Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. Do you remember Tucker Carlson came out against Nagasaki and Hiroshima and so on?
I mean, that's another stupid position by Tucker Carlson, right? If we didn't bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons, right, tens of thousands more Japanese would have died in the conflict, and tens of thousands more Americans would have died in the conflict, right? Those two atomic bombs ended the war promptly and also put Soviet Union on notice of what we're capable of doing.
I remember he said that Israel emptied Bethlehem of Christians, which was disgusting slander, because there was a thriving Christian community in Bethlehem, as you call it in English, and then the Palestinian Authority took over and they started persecuting the minorities.
So this stuff is really pernicious, and let me tell you why this stuff is catching on. I think there's.
And the chat says Darryl Cooper is awesome. Yeah, he's an awesome liar. I mean, if that's what you're into, you'll get fed by Darryl Cooper, right? If you're just looking for people to feed back to you what you want to hear and get your dopamine flowing, then he's awesome.
There's a number of reasons, and explain why it's pernicious. First of all, there's a political attraction to these arguments. Forget about the Jewish arguments. This is a pro-Trump, America first argument,
and I am A-OK with a pro-Trump, America first argument. I am A-OK with a nationalist argument. I am A-OK with an argument about America retrenching from the world and instead narrowly pursuing its own best interests.
But it's the kind of fake history for America first, because what it says, I mean, the feeling that people who are some of Trump's voters have is that
And the chat says, I don't think the reaction to Darryl Cooper is productive. Well, people aren't primarily reacting to Darryl Cooper. He's a nobody. But Tucker Carlson has an enormous audience, and he has enormous sway over Donald Trump. So Tucker Carlson shows, once again, what terrible judgment he has on many things. To call Darryl Cooper a nobody, some great historian.
A commitment of the American elite to the empire is destroying the republic. So that all the stuff that you and I complain about, that this elite is more concerned with its international connections and its status inside the country that come from the international connections than with the electorate and the electoral process, the nation.
There is a great deal to that critique. I think it's a significant critique. It's not a perfidious critique.
More concerned that with the global elite and its global status than it is with the nation. They have those same attitudes, so we share that with them. But then what they're doing is they're creating the kind of prehistory to the current moment, and they're saying, when did we go wrong? When did we choose the empire, or our leadership chose the empire over the republic? Or
because there are situations where you either expand into something that might approach an empire. America is not an empire. That is only a rhetorical trick. Right? America has never been anything like the British Empire or the Roman Empire. So if you are interested in the integrity of words, America has never been an empire. But America has expanded through its alliances with nations all over the globe, particularly during the Cold War, in its own interests. And then after the end of the Cold War, it would make sense for America to dial back on those alliances and pursue more of an America first agenda. So in a certain situation, pursuing an agenda of international alliances makes more sense, such as during the Cold War. And after the end of the Cold War, right, pulling out of NATO and retrenching from a lot of these strangling alliances makes more sense. So I am on board with this critique that Michael Duran here is critiquing.
Or the progressive internationalism over nationalism. Well, it was World War II. And now what they've done is they have created this sort of evil elders of Zion. What Darryl Cooper is doing is he's telling us that it was. I've lost your
interpretation. Churchill was the villain of World War II.
Churchill's the villain.
Right, and I don't care about that. All right, if you got an argument that Churchill is the villain of World War II, then as long as you can make your argument with facts, then fine. But if you have to lie to make your argument, that's when you lose me.
Churchill's the villain. He's not a hero, and the Americans who are holding up Churchill as a hero are really traitors to the nation. Because we were tricked, manipulated, duped by this clever guy, Churchill, who was being, was a puppet on.
I expect the United States, France, Israel, Saudi Arabia, England, Canada, Australia to all pursue their own national self-interest. And so it was in Great Britain's self-interest to get America into the war in both World War I and World War II. And it was America's interest to stay out of the war for as long as possible, let the other parties slaughter each other, and then America can come in into the conflict and gain much more power and influence. And that's precisely what we did in World War I and World War II. We allowed the other nations to slaughter each other, and then the United States came in and reaped the rewards.
On the strings of the Jews to get into this war. So if we just get rid of the anti-Semitism for a moment and we just see the argument, this is a moment for that argument to be attractive because people don't believe they're elite anymore. And then you get these guys like Jocko, and you realize that there's really an audience out there for this. Forget about the anti-Semitism for a moment, just for the argument about choosing the nation over the empire. Imagine that audience, Gadi, is 5 million people, right? And
well, there's an audience for it because it's a very defensible position, right? Choosing the best interests of America over America getting unnecessarily entangled in international alliances, right? Out of those two, I'd come down in the middle, right? That we should preserve some of our alliances, rejigger other alliances, and abandon other alliances. But it should be through the narrow focus of what's in America's best interest.
And imagine that you can get get them to pay for your Substack for $50 a year. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. If you can get to give you at least enough money to have a middle class salary, and you can even get more than that. And that's what. So.
Okay, so let's listen to a little bit here of Darryl Cooper talking with Tucker Carlson.
And to the extent that it is taught in, say, airport bookstores, our popular historians are people like John Meacham and Michael Beschloss and Doris Kearns Goodwin and Anne Applebaum, not only sort of the dumbest people in the country, I would say, I know most of them, but also completely dishonest political actors. And so I think I can tell that you hate.
Okay, none of those people are dumb, right? They all have very different politics from me. I don't admire any of them or go out of my way to read any of them.
Compliments, but I just want to say I think you are the most important popular historian working in the United States today.
That's insane. Tucker just has terrible judgment. I mean, how could any decent corporation advertise on Tucker Carlson when he says such insane things?
You work in a different medium on Substack X podcasts, but I'm a fan of yours because of the way you treat history, which is with relentless curiosity and honesty. And I'm sure you have all kinds of political beliefs or religious beliefs or whatever, but I feel like you get to what you think is true based on really intense research. So for those people who aren't familiar with who you are, I want people to know who you are, and I want you to be widely recognized as the most.
And did you do any research before promoting this hack, Tucker? Okay, question from the chat. Why do you think that countries that rely on alliances with superpowers to survive won't just jump ship onto the Chinese and Russian train if we let go of them? I feel like that wouldn't be in our interest. Well, we'd have to take it country at a time. There's no broad universal principle here except for what's in America's interest. I think expanding NATO is an absolute disaster. It unnecessarily increases our odds of getting entangled in unnecessary conflicts with Russia, so that Sweden's joined NATO, and as Norway joined NATO, the continual expansion of NATO is a disaster. I don't see how it's in America's best interest to be in NATO. Right? So expanding NATO is terrible, but I don't even see any reason for the United States to be in NATO anymore. On the other hand, I see very good reasons why we should have a strong alliance with Japan. Right? Japan is America's most important ally, and Australia is America's best ally. Right? Australia is the most aligned with the United States. So you often hear rhetoric about how Israel's our greatest ally. Well, Japan is America's most important ally, but Australia is America's greatest ally in terms of the two nations being so similar in their interests. So we should maintain very strong relations with Japan, Australia, India to contain the rise of China. Right? We only need a narrow alliance with India to contain the rise of China, and also with Vietnam and the Philippines and South Korea also to contain the rise of China.
Important historian in the United States, because I think that you are. So that's my last compliment for our time together. I know it was excruciating. Tell us some of the stories, we call them stories, but historical events that you have taken a really close look at recently.
So I decided to start with an easy one. I did a 26-hour series on the early history of Zionism and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Whether that was naivety or hubris, it turned out pretty well.
Yes.
You know, and the reason it turned out well, I think, and I've had time to really think about it over the years. I started it in 2015. It took me a few years to complete.
Okay, so if he's a serious historian, the reason it turns out well is because people who know the subject better than he does say, hey, you did a good job. But that's not the basis on why he thinks he did well. Right? So he does not gauge and rate his efforts by the traditional standards of a historian.
But I've received hundreds of emails from Israelis, from...
Oh, okay. So morons who watch your show and compliment you, they like it. All right. So that is not how any normal historian would speak. Oh, I got hundreds of messages, therefore I know that I did a good work of history. Right? No historian would say that. Right? A blogger like Darryl Cooper might say that.
Jews around the world who are, you know, boosters of Israel, as well as Palestinians and people around the Middle East.
Okay, so morons like his show, all right? Morons like Joe Rogan, morons like Jocko Willink, Oprah, Brett Weinstein, Eric Weinstein, talk radio, right? There are just a lot of idiots out there turning out low IQ right-wing content for which there is an enormous low IQ audience. I hate to say it, but John Podhoretz and the people from Commentary, once again, did a really good job
But
here.
I want to do a brief 1-minute thing about how social media distorts the national conversation in weird ways. So for 2 days, if you are a person on Twitter or in social media conversations, part of that conversation has been dominated by a psychotic interview by Tucker Carlson of a guy who wants to argue that Winston Churchill caused World War II because he was in the pay of the Rothschilds. He is some kind of substacker. I'm not going to mention his name. You can find it if you want to.
Darryl
He's
Cooper.
clearly one of these bizarre autodidact psychopaths who has come up with his own weird theory of the 20th century.
Well, there is an enormous audience that will pay him money for a theory that says shadowy Zionist financiers have a disproportionate effect on history. And sometimes they do, and sometimes that influence is exaggerated.
That contains within it anti-Semitism, effective pro-Nazism, and this weird...
So I have no interest in labeling Darryl Cooper anti-Semitic or pro-Nazi. I just think he's a shoddy, mediocre person attempting to do history.
You know, the real truth is that the people you think are heroes are actually villains, and the people you think are villains.
And that's the ridiculous thing about a lot of alt-right personalities and content, is this knee-jerk contrarianism that if the historical consensus is X, in truth, it must really be Y. And I got to hand it to a lefty who pointed this out this morning, Matt Bernius, all right, writing on OutsideTheBeltway.com. He's on the left, but he nails it. Tucker Carlson promotes Hitler apologists. Here's his essay. One of the marks of the intellectual dark web and the alt-right in general is an addiction to contrarianism. All right, that is accurate. The idea is that if most people are sheeple and they think X, then chances are Y is secretly right. That's true. We got a great example of this on Monday. Tucker Carlson proudly dedicated 2 hours of his program to a historian who believes that the real villain of World War II was Churchill. And Darryl Cooper says, millions of people just ended up dead in these Nazi camps. Right? So the passive voice does a lot of hard work in this phrase. Millions of people just ended up dead. I mean, I wonder how they ended up dead. It's not like the Nazis under Hitler had well-documented, mechanized plans for the extermination of Jews and 6 million other people. Oh, wait, they did. Like a moths to a flame, Carlson's guess galaxy brain contrarian takes on the Second World War were immediately promoted by the type of folks who think technocratic bodybuilders and people on the spectrum should be ruling us all, including Elon Musk. All right, Elon Musk promoted that terrible book, Bad Therapy, and he was also promoting this ridiculous Tucker Carlson interview of Darryl Cooper. Elon Musk just has terrible taste. I mean, I'm glad he took over Twitter. I appreciate the increased amount of freedom of speech on Twitter, but I wish that Elon Musk didn't say political things because he has so many moronic reactions. It's just stupid, and it makes him less effective, and it's bad for his businesses, and it just seems incredibly self-destructive.
And can I say something that I never get to say? As a historian, I find it offensive that that's how he labels himself. There, I've said it. Thank you.
Yes. Well, so there he is. He on
Twitter, you have to say historian here.
That's true. Very good. That would be very good. Anyway, I don't want to talk about this because have the discussion about how this guy is wrong, because he is wrong. I want to talk about this question of the way in which a wild opinion that is being retailed by somebody with a following has the same effect as any.
See, I get it. I understand the appeal of a contrarian perspective because it makes you feel smarter. So when I have been socially ostracized, when I have been lonely, when I have been dismissed and degraded by the world around me, right? I love looking for theories and alternative perspectives that help me reaffirm that, oh, well, even though I've endured all this humiliation and poverty and social isolation, at least I see through the BS, right? When you buy into these conspiracy theories, when you just go with this knee-jerk contrarianism, you can comfort yourself that even if your own life is incredibly limited and flawed and often humiliating, yeah, but at least you see the truth, right? At least you are a brave warrior for the truth. At least you're willing to consider these outside contrarian alternative perspectives and that you're not just sheep, right? I recognize that psychological appeal, but it leads a lot of people down a bad path.
Look, hey, squirrel moment for a dog.
And I'm not talking bad path as in, oh, you might come to a more skeptical view of the Israel Project than I do, or you might come to a more skeptical view of Jews than I do, or you might be more nationalist than I am, or you might be more isolationist than I am. No, I'm talking about bad path purely in terms of the quality of your life, right? It's going to make you poorer and more isolated, right? You're going to be less likely to get married. You're going to be less likely to have esteem in your community, in your profession, in your educational institution, right? You'll be marginalized if you embrace mediocrities like Darryl Cooper.
Like you're walking your dog and there's a squirrel, and then you're out of it because the dog starts crazy going after the squirrel. You're on the leash. You're running after the dog is pulling you. You're on the leash. And this happened, and it's like we're in the middle of a presidential race with 63 days or 62 days to go until we're choosing the president of the United States. Weird stuff was going on yesterday where nobody was on the campaign trail, so maybe that had some effect on this. But this gets maybe we can talk about this in relation to Christine's book. But I was very, very disheartened, and once again, I actually want to take this moment to apologize to the American people, to history, and to intellectual seriousness for my actually pretty central role in launching Tucker Carlson's career. 29 years ago by hiring him at the Weekly Standard, where he became a kind of star profile writer and analyst. And that is how he first got on television. And I really do believe that when I am forced to account for myself in Olam Haba, the world to come, my role in promulgating the career of this actual villain of current American history, who is now seems set upon creating a counter story, Howard Zinn-like.
Okay, I don't think Tucker Carlson's a villain, right? I think he does great things and he does idiotic things.
Of the 20th and 21st centuries, in which Jews play a malign role, and which in some fashion, whatever has happened to Jews since the beginning of the 20th century is either our fault or the people who did things to us that were bad, they didn't really mean it, and other forces, malign forces, were manipulating them into doing terrible things. This is it's beyond grotesque.
I'm not some huge John Podhoretz fan, because John Podhoretz has taken it on himself to police what's legitimate Jewish discussion. People have just so often found him incredibly obnoxious in their interactions with him. He's just frequently so incredibly rude and nasty to people. But he's really good at social media. He's really good at podcasting. He's really good talking about popular culture. He's really good writing about popular culture. He has a lot of insights, even though I don't particularly care for much of his politics or for how he generally conducts himself.
It's a classic anti-Semitic trope. You blame Jews for their own victimization, and it relates to what we were talking about just the other day regarding Israel.
Well, sometimes Jews play a significant role in their own victimization. I mean, I just read this article on Tablet magazine. All right, here's a woman, all right, who played a significant role in her own victimization. All right. I was raped because I am Jewish. All right. Sexual assault against Jews as an instrument of anti-Semitism is more prevalent than we know. So she is a young woman, and she's coming out with a book on rape and sexual trauma. And she goes to a bar, and she meets a guy. Right. She met the guy on a dating app. She meets him at a dive bar, and we sit down, and she lets him know that she is Jewish. And then he says, would it be offensive if I played a Kanye song around you? And she reacts, yeah, don't do that. He makes a joke, and then he invites her to join him at his nearby Airbnb for a glass of wine. I assumed he wanted to continue our conversation and agreed. You're insane, right? If you go back to a man's house for a glass of wine, it should be taken for granted that you're going to have sex, whether you want to or not. And then she spins this great big story about how he rapes her. He puts on Christmas music, right? He turns the volume up on Christmas music. And then he pins her down and he rapes her. Rapes her to Christmas music. My God, he pulled my clothes off and raped me by force. You met him at a bar and you went back to his place. You barely knew him. I begged him to stop, but he ignored me. Even when I tried to fight him off, I felt dehumanized. He saw me as an animal. The Christmas music played on loop. An hour later, he released me back into the night. I told a few people about the rape. She didn't report it. I didn't tell anybody about the rapist's anti-Semitism. Right? Many survivors choose not to report sexual assault because we believe we are to blame. You were to blame. All right? You were to blame in the extent that you deliberately place yourself in peril. I did not report the rape because of the toll it would take on my mental health. If you are this mentally weak, you should have a minder, right? If you are unable to take responsibility for your own decisions, right, you should not be dating. You should have a minder. And I can't give your account much credibility, given on the basis of the account, you deliberately went back to the home of a man to drink alcohol, someone you didn't know, who you just spent time in a bar, and you'd already received warning signs that he wasn't a big fan of the Jews. And then you don't have the guts to report him to reduce the chances that other women will get raped? I'm not a big fan. Right. I am a big fan of the Kipper. Mr. Kip, what's going on, bro?
Hey, man, I don't know if I'd last a week in today's dating market. I remember my ex, every once in a while, she would say, not tonight, I have a headache, when we would be sitting in the living room. And I'd say something like, is that a fact now? Oh, really? And she would know that's kind of the sign where you got about a 5-second head start, because we're getting ready to have a tiger chasing a gazelle right here in the living room. Does that make me a bad person? Luke, she never made it up the steps. Never made it up the steps. And whenever she said, I got a headache, I took that as a challenge. Does that make me a bad person?
It might. I don't know the full context. I don't know what she really meant. It might not.
Well, she was a willing victim 9 times out of 10. Just put it that way. I think
that's what most rapists say.
and don't women say in the back of their head that there's some kind of rape fantasy, hidden back there or whatever? My feeling is maybe I would have respected her decision a little bit more if she would have run a little faster or wasn't giggling as she was running. You know what I mean? But it all ended the same. We had about 7 or 8 of those little soft steps that go up to the next level of the house. She never made it up to the 7th or 8th step. I'd get that ankle and it'd be awful. It's like something out of National Geographic at that point. So I'll save you those details. But I wanted to apologize twice tonight, Luke. Once for calling early. You got a flow, and the flow is call in later. But I feel like Kip the show killer sometimes. So I feel like, well, maybe I'll call in early, and Luke is strong enough to rebuild that audience. You feel me, Luke?
I'm glad that you called in, bro.
And then the other reason I was wanting to apologize is because last time I didn't think brought any energy or any kind of like show prep or whatever. So I took a few minutes tonight, made a couple of little notes, and the first one was basically just like thinking about your disciples, your acolytes, the guys that are always there. And I was, they're the ones, they deserve the show prep. But I was thinking Kimidov and Cal and Total Tech, and sometimes we see Claire and Colin and Glib. And it makes me wonder, which of the soldiers, when the pride parades and the race demonstrations get bloody, which one of these soldiers can you depend on? You know what I mean? When the atrocities start, is there a particular one that you're like, man, when it gets serious, I just call so-and-so and it's handled?
Yeah, there are people that I would call in a security situation, but it's not anyone on the show or in the audience. It's people in real life.
Right. Well, I just know you are the guru, to some of these people. So you have amazing power, and I'm sure you understand amazing responsibility comes with that. And responsibility is something that we can both agree on is falling out of vogue today. Isn't that unfortunate? That responsibility is an old white fogey idea that just needs to be left in the dustbin of history. Do you notice the way responsibility and accountability seems to be fading to black?
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with an emphasis on responsibility rather than an emphasis on rights. So I'm not a huge fan of civil rights legislation. And in my personal experience, men are more likely to take responsibility than other groups.
Right. Well, we have to. There's no white knight coming for you and me, Luke. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Got me thinking about I believe it was sometime in the 40s when I guess it would have been FDR put together the AFDC, and he put it together for widows, widows. It was put together for a specific reason, and he specifically wanted to make sure that single women and divorcees didn't get that. But in 1961, that's when states like New York and Illinois and some others up north, they thought it'd be wise to go ahead and offer that to single mothers. And my God, catastrophic effects. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's hard, if they were here trying to defend themselves, they would try to blame the pill and, lots of other things. Or maybe they're happy with the circumstances of today. One thing that pisses me off about conservatives is that they don't have any strength of their own convictions when it comes to like corporations that were supporting I don't know, Black Lives Matter. They had some specific things they were dead set against, and one of them was the traditional family. And every one of them corporations, Coca-Cola, Pepsi. I mean, if you got to drink RC Cola, there should be people, Matt Taibbi's and all these people that are supposed to be good journalists. They should be holding their feet to the fire because if we're anything, we're sort of a corporate oligarchy. So if you're going to get them to act right, don't you think one by one you got to run campaigns against them and fucking put a mirror up to their actions? You agree or disagree, Luke?
Yeah, for a tiny number of people, that should be a focus. But for 99.9% of people, they should not worry about it. You should just get on with your life. I don't boycott anyone. I think people should try to live a happy life and not get too sidetracked into vendettas. So I don't like companies subsidizing Black Lives Matter, but I think it's unhealthy for an ordinary person to spend too much time on that. I think there are just better things to concentrate on. Just build up a good life and
but what's to stop them from try to perverting your children, the youth, our culture in the future? There was a little bit of pushback with maybe like a Bud Light or whatever, but there should have been 100 times that. I don't know what the chat's saying. Maybe they agree.
Well, people on the right are simply not as obsessed with politics, which is why they're happier. Right? Mm-hmm. People on the left are obsessed with politics, and therefore they're much more mentally ill because they're obsessed with things outside of their locus of control. But if people instead put their primary focus on their work, on their families, on their friends, on their religion, on their community, on their hobbies, right, they're going to be much happier and much more effective in life than people who are obsessed with politics, unless you're one of those people who just loves politics. Like, I enjoy politics, so I talk about politics. But for your ordinary person, right, they should have much better things to do with their time.
Right. Sometimes I mow the grass and I get some of these vexing questions. And God, Elliott Blatt, I just couldn't. Row after row, I just kept mowing these perfect lines, and it kept coming down to Elliott Blatt. That charm, that charisma. and what I couldn't figure out, man. I mean, you've seen the way the room radiates. You've seen the way he lights it up. You've seen what his charisma does. I couldn't figure out, does it travel in lights and particles or waves? You get what I'm saying? How does it get there?
Here's how I got to know Elliott Blatt. I was just vaguely aware of his existence, and I didn't spend even 1 minute, to the best of my knowledge, thinking about him. And then in something like early February of 2020, he said, Luke looks so unhappy on his show. He feels trapped in his current arrangement with his current co-host. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, yes, I do feel trapped. I am unhappy, and I'm going to stop doing these shows with my current co-host. So it was Elliott Blatt's insight into my situation that triggered me, inspired me, freed me to do what I needed to do, which was to go back to a solo show. And so Elliott Blatt has some pretty sharp insights. Like he can really bring it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I bet in real life, though, I bet he is just got some, he's an artist. What do you want to bet? He's got some Duvid in him, wouldn't you think? In real life, or do you think he's more functional?
I think he's the opposite of Duvid. Elliott Blatt has way too much empathy for his own good.
Oh, okay.
He's got out of control empathy, which keeps sabotaging his life.
To a fault.
Yeah. He's got an excess. He excessively indulges his empathy. Duvid does not suffer from an excess of empathy.
Mm-hmm. The second thing that kept bugging the piss out of me when I was mowing the grass, I had got around like to the other side of the yard, and I was wondering if maybe we weren't underutilizing your pearly whites. I mean, I was thinking, we've got solar flares, we've got foes here. Bibi Netanyahu, he's like a damn hornet, just always stirring shit up. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would think that maybe those pearly whites of yours, they're so damn beautiful. They're so mesmerizing. Could they defeat a solar flare? You know, could Raytheon, you get what I'm saying? Could they be used to repel the Houthis or something, you know, to get the shipments through the Red Sea? Tell me, have you, do you feel like you're getting full use out of that remarkable set of pearly whites that you got, Luke?
No, I'm a great underachiever. I definitely underachieve my abilities.
Well, I'm definitely jealous. Keep going. You were sharing. Keep going.
Yeah. I am extraordinarily good in a narrow number of things, and I'm mediocre in most things. For example, I don't have any special athletic talent. It's easy for me to lose my concentration if I'm doing some prosaic task. But like everyone, I think most of us are really good at some things, mediocre at other things, and downright terrible at other things. The important thing is to be in the realm of reality. Usually if you have a spouse or if you have close friends or you're closely connected with your family, right, these people will let you know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And so, for example, when I would have technical troubles, it would drive me crazy. I spent $500 for a sound quality consultation with an audio expert after I'd been messing around and just my sound quality was terrible due to my own efforts for like 2 years. But just dropping $500 for a 60-minute, 30-minute, I don't know, consult with an audio expert, like got me on the right track, developing contacts where I could pay $100 whenever I had a technical question. So I'd rather pay, $100 for 10 minutes of tech support than to bang my head against the wall for hours, which is often what I used to do. So learning what I should outsource. And I think for all of us, learning what we should outsource and what we should learn to do ourselves, these are important questions.
I wonder, what do you think, Elliott Blatt these days? You know, a Hummer will only take you so far in life, but you imagine you can get a lot of tech support from Elliott Blatt with a good Hummer. You know what I'm saying? Not that I'd be the one, not that you'd be the one, but I'd
rather pay him. I'd rather pay him with money.
Anyway, I was going to say, along those same lines, I think that maybe with you having Elliott there so close by in San Francisco, I'm waiting for the live San Francisco bathhouse pod. I remember you talking with him one time, and he was trying to just describe a grove to where the monkeypox crowd would go hang out. And you started asking him about the sights and the sounds and the smells and the unbridled passions. And I don't know. I think we could really experience the whole monkeypox magic if a couple of you wild and crazy guys did a pod, live from the bathhouse. Do you think Elliott would be willing?
Yeah, but it'd have to be an elevated bathhouse. It couldn't be one filled with sin and semen. It'd have to be an elevated bathhouse where elevated men, real aristocrats of the spirit, showed up and they discussed elevated topics and they weren't screwing each other, but they just sat around in a bathhouse and talked about philosophy and art and literature and take all the good things about bathhouse culture and simply subtract the sinful semen stain things. Right.
Well, I thought the semen stains, I thought that was everything. I thought that was the highlight of the evening. You're saying that's just the cherry on top.
No. I'm saying that's the antithesis of the kind of culture we want to develop here. We should not be spilling our seed in bathhouses or on dusty soil. We should just save it for our spouse of the opposite sex. But I recognize that gays have made many great contributions. So I am all for recognizing the great things that groups do, and also recognizing the terrible things that they do, such as when they spread a nasty disease like AIDS or monkeypox through irresponsible sex.
Right. So basically, you're saying you could understand maybe the spirit of the bathhouse once maybe had a proud history, is what you're saying.
Yes.
But like so many things in our culture, it got perverted, inverted, and now it's just a gay, It's another version of a gay pride parade is what you're saying.
Exactly.
I get you. Now, you remember you used to date a porn star.
I did.
And again, me mowing grass. I just got too much time on my hands when I'm mowing grass. And I was thinking you missed an opportunity for the first ever adult scratch and sniff book. And the title, I Banged a Porn Star, right? How did you miss that?
There have been many such scratch and sniff publications, so it wouldn't have been the first. And yuck! I mean, now that I'm 58 and that was 20 years in the past, I just don't want to go there again.
I was gonna say, have you noticed that? I don't know, while we've been alive, seems like every man that's subsequent man born after us seems to have a lower sperm count than the man before him. Have you caught on to this?
Yeah, I've heard that that's a bit of a problem, but I heard on Tucker Carlson's show that if you get sunshine on your anus, that can really help reverse these negative tendencies. So I try to spend 20 minutes a day just getting that direct sunshine right on the brown hole.
Okay. I can get away with that, but I didn't know you could.
Oh yeah, I've got a special place in LA where it's very heterosexual, but a bunch of guys gather to expose the back door to the sun, but in a completely heterosexual way.
There's no bleaching involved?
No bleaching, just the bleaching of the God-given sunshine.
Have you you know, if you notice when you read the articles, like what's to blame for the low T and the sperm counts, pesticides, cell phones, plastic bottles, as many articles as there are is as many causes as they give. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
Have you not noticed that?
Yeah, well, that's why I am quite skeptical about many claims. I want to see some peer-reviewed meta-analysis before I take any of these things too seriously.
Mm-hmm. You know, you had told me sometime in the history there was some sort of an IQ selection event that had really benefited, if nobody else, the Ashkenazi Jews, right? Sometime you said there was like a 1 century there where they kind of were squeezed into some little level of greatness for some evolutionary reason. And I don't know. I think the same thing with white guys. I think of those white guys from the era of, say, Nietzsche and Darwin and all that kind of stuff. I think they were probably smarter in the mid 1800s and late 1800s. And then from the time, prophylactics were, I guess, in the 1870s, 1880s, everything that they try to do to like help things out, the smartest among us take the stuff, take the advice, and the dumbest among us end up procreating. And the end result is the dirtbags seem to have outbred the normal folk. What say you on this particular topic?
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think it's pretty clear from the evidence that the mean IQ in Great Britain, for example, and around the Western world was steadily increasing until the Industrial Revolution. And then by the 1820s, 1830s, depending when a country industrializes, then the average IQ starts decreasing. So we had a eugenic trend, and then with the Industrial Revolution, we enter into a dysgenic trend, where prior to the Industrial Revolution, smarter people had more children than dumber people. After the Industrial Revolution, dumber people start having more children than smarter people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but do you agree that in the 1800s, man, some of those guys were smart. They reached they were very, very smart. Another thing that I think people get wrong about people from the past is I told you I used to do a lot of pallbearing, and I would go out there and kill time walking those grave markers and smoking cigarettes. And those people, they lived as long as we do today without those advancements in medicine and all that. The reason their life expectancy was so much shorter is because half of them died off in childhood. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. once you passed 18 or so, people lived approximately as long as we do now. So medical care makes very little difference in the average life quality and expectancy. It's more something to palliate your anxiety or to show concern. Oh, you should go to a doctor and get checked out. Right? Generally speaking, doctors can't do much for either the quality of your life or the length of your life.
And you and I know there's such things as placebo effects and stuff like that. And like I've told you before, doctors have boat payments to make, and that always has to go in the equation. And I just saw with my dad, he raised his hand for too many elective surgeries just because the doctor said so-and-so would pay most of it and you wouldn't be much out of pocket. And I just remember his shoulder feeling like shit 6 months after a procedure where it was supposed to be great in 30 days. You get what I'm saying? He's an old man. 6 months is a large percentage of probably the time he has left, you know? So,
and dentists are worse. Dentists are worse. That they are less ethical even than doctors, and chiropractors are probably even worse than dentists.
And along those lines of dentists, I got pissed off. You know, me, you, SJJ, and Elliott was talking a week or two ago, and I just glanced over it when I talked about the year 2000 is when they approved direct-to-consumer marketing. And that's when we started seeing all those ask your doctor ads. Ask your doctor if such and such is right for you.
Right.
And I think about all those doctors and all those pain clinics. They had to notice their lobbies were full of fucking junkies. They were full of junkies. You get what I'm saying? Those weren't normal people in their lobbies. And not only were their lobbies full of junkies, their parking lots were full of junkies. And they had to have security officers come in and try to control the junkies. And this went on for like years and years. And I told you, Walgreens, CVS, they went and bought up the most prime real estate all over the town I was living in. And I'm sure they did that in every town. And they sat around and worked as drug dealers between them and those pain clinics. And they just indiscriminately hooked, what do you think, 10% of America at least? And then when they turn around and took those drugs back, hell, the people had to start finding heroin, all kinds of crazy shit to get their fix. You see what they did, and you see how little. What do you see? That pisses me off. Can you feel it in my voice? Can you hear it in my voice, Luke?
Yeah, but I don't primarily place the blame on the doctors. No one was forced at a gunpoint to go to a doctor and ask for pain medicine prescription. So millions of Americans were able to take their pain medicine as prescribed without becoming junkies. On the other hand, those who are predisposed to addiction and predisposed to trying to check out and take the easy way, all right, they got hooked. More productive citizens overwhelmingly did not. Also, prior to this, there seems to have been a problem in the opposite direction, that millions of Americans were racked by unnecessary pain and they couldn't get prescriptions for pain. I know Adderall changed my life. If I could have been prescribed stimulant medication in my teens, I would have had a much better quality of life. So I'm sure some people get an Adderall prescription that they don't need, but I'm not at all convinced that more people are getting Adderall prescriptions that they don't need than people are not getting Adderall prescriptions that they do need. We have made it really hard to prescribe stimulant medications when millions of Americans would have their lives dramatically improved by them. On the other hand, there are a significant number of Americans who won't take Adderall or other stimulants as prescribed and will abuse it. And so I primarily put that on them, not on the doctors. But yeah, there was a problem with the Sacklers and with the opioid epidemic, but it's not just on the Sacklers and the opioids. I would primarily place the blame on people who were abusing the opioids, or in other words, people who had built a life that predisposed them to crippling addiction, right? If you had a good relationship with your spouse and you loved your kids, you're highly unlikely to get addicted to opioids.
Right.
Or to alcohol and drugs.
Well, I just, some would say, well, they finally responded to that. But by the time you realize that early on, those pain clinics, the epicenter of that problem was in and around Broward County, the Fort Lauderdale area, and kind of like around that area was the epicenter. And it got so bad that companies like Allegiant Airlines were doing daily nonstop flights from places like Bluefield, West Virginia, Huntington, West Virginia, down to Fort Lauderdale. And you know what I'm saying, Luke? Somebody should have sounded the alarm before they had 2 or 3 years of nonstop flights organized to put up to be able to cater to the dope fiends. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and there were people who went to war, and some people, did heroic work, and they had to fight through some obstacles. But it's not like there's only one side that you can go wrong with opioids or with stimulants, right? You don't want to overprescribe them. You don't want to underprescribe them.
No, I get you. I wanted to ask you, one of the things, you could tell before when we talked that I feel like I fell short for my father is that I feel like he was one of the last of the all-arounders. He could do it all. And seems like most people, I mean, it was probably true then, but it's definitely true now. Most people are either symbol manipulators or they're thing manipulators. They're either good mechanically or they're good like with letters and numbers and stuff like that. But it's a rare person that can do both. You know what I mean? Have you noticed that? That seems like
Yes.
A lot of times skills are distributed out. This guy, he can't manipulate symbols for shit, but put a thing in front of him and watch him go. You know what I mean? What do you think might
Right. Well, we all naturally tend to do the things that we're good at, and there's nothing inherently superior about manipulating symbols or manipulating things. And if it's more efficient for you to just manipulate symbols all day and then hire someone else to manipulate things for you, then I see nothing dishonorable about that. I don't, as far as building a good life, the ability to do mechanical things, I don't see as particularly important if you are sufficiently capable at earning a living that you can then hire someone to do the things that you're not great at. But I read a book on Hollywood movie and TV producers, and one of the Jewish producers that I interviewed, he loved working on his car. So some blokes just love working on a car, getting in there, doing mechanical things. But I don't think that's inherently superior to someone else who might love producing a podcast on history.
And then last thing I was wanting to mention to you tonight was a relationship I had when I was young during the Marines, time in the Marines. And I don't know if it's like reason number 763 that I should be going to hell, or if it's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I hadn't met a girl, and I hate to say it, but I didn't even know her name. I just knew her phone number, and I'd go out to the club, and it was an amazing thing that I could go out to the club and hang out till 1:30, and if there wasn't a willing woman, then I could just pick up the phone and call this number. The number was Topkiss, Topkiss. And the girl always answered the phone. And I'd say, "Hey, it's Kip. I'm in town." And she'd say, "I'll be right over." And it would be like 30 minutes later, she would be right over. And it would just be a perfect evening. I didn't feel like I had to show her around the house or make her feel home or whatever. She would give me everything my heart desired. And then all of a sudden, about 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, maybe I'd get up to pee and I'd look around. It was like a ghost. She'd be gone. Never a love letter. Never call me, let's get together for lunch. I don't know. I was either a bad person or maybe that was the most perfect relationship ever. Which one was it? Because it went on for a couple of years.
It depends. I mean, it met your needs, all right? It was perfect for you, but what if it was devastating for her? I have no idea. People are complicated. Whether it was good and bad depends on the nature of your hero system.
Yeah, it was. She never intruded on my life whatsoever. And at the time I didn't think about it. I just like, hey, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You just say thank you. But I just looked around later on in life and go, man, I was either a super bad person or I got very lucky and found like what most men would consider the perfect relationship. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Well, there are often perfect relationships when they're not overly close. And so sometimes we form relationships or friendships, and then they start getting too close and they blow up. So
right. They want more. They want more out of the relationship, don't they?
Not just that, but people reveal themselves and you realize that you're incompatible, or just with greater intensity, there's more chance of an explosion. So right from how you described it, you each met each other's needs for a time.
Yeah.
And if it had gotten closer and more intense, it might well have blown up.
I told myself either that was a perfect relationship or there was a perfectly good explanation why she never said anything, because do you even remember a singer by the name of Henry Lee Summers from back in the 80s? I think he was a one hit wonder. But anyway, it was like an outdoor concert where I had met her, and she was with a girlfriend. And I remember I was drunk at the time, but somehow inside of about 45 minutes, nasty things were going on inside the Honda Accord, and those girls were not bashful. Her or her girlfriend were doing nasty things right in front of each other. And I was like, man, this is a strange couple here. And then so like, she just gave me the phone number. I guess she expected that I was going to remember her name or whatever, but I don't know. I beat myself up about that of like, what was that all about? And then every once in a while, maybe she had a husband or something, that would be the one thing that made it all make sense, wouldn't it, Luke?
Yeah. Or not necessarily a husband, live-in boyfriend or some other, right? Usually women don't benefit from a situationship, right? You benefited, you got your rocks off. Right. It's hard to believe that she was better off for it. On the other side, she wouldn't be with you if you weren't both at the same level of dysfunction or function, right?
Right.
We can only be with someone who's at our level of maturity or immaturity.
Right, like two moths to a flame. Yeah, I remember I was a bit naive as a young man. I remember walking home from a girl's house and having, this is back when I was in the Marines, and I remember two corporals who worked at my squadron. And they were like, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, just walking home from my girlfriend's house. They said, girlfriend's house? What are you talking about? They said, get in the car. Let's give you a ride. So they gave me a ride back to my bachelor's enlisted quarters. And they said, whatever you're doing in there, it needs to stop. I was like, what do you mean? I'm just coming from my girlfriend's house. He said, that's married quarters you're coming out of from. Somebody's married. That woman you're seeing, she's got to be somebody's husband. That's somebody's wife. He's probably in Okinawa or somewhere, And dumb me. That stuff never occurred to me. So about some things I've always been like super naive on, but that was the one thing looking back. It didn't strike me till years later. That one thing that I thought was a perfect relationship was probably a woman that was married or something. You know what I mean? Just in my idea, that's just what a perfect relationship looked like. But anyway, that's all I had. I hate to break the momentum of the show, but you got plenty of time to fix that, brother. Have a good one.
Okay, take care, man. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Okay, let me play a little bit more here from John Podhoretz.
Israel and the murder of the 6 hostages by Hamas. It should be said, this idea that the Jews were behind World War II isn't new. This autodidact, whatever he is, it's not like he came up with the novel theory. Pat Buchanan published a book arguing not really the Rothschild dimension to it, as far as I recall, but arguing that World War II was unnecessary.
I mean, completely bizarre idea for Pat Buchanan. All right, he had a flourishing career as a cable TV pundit, and then he goes publishing an unnecessary book arguing that World War II was unnecessary. And he just blew up his punditry career didn't exactly produce new insights into history. And essentially, he exiled himself from public life when he did this circa 2006.
2006.
Right.
And of course,
well, that was
Charles Lindbergh himself said in his speech in Des Moines, Iowa in 1941 that the only people who were calling for the war were the British, the Jews, and I think the liberals were the third group. Right. So this is a classic trope, and we've seen it again and again. What I think,
well, it might have been correct. Charles Lindbergh, I'm sure, said some things that were accurate, some things that were inaccurate. He made some bad choices, and he was courageous in some ways, and he was an idiot in some ways.
I think is interesting is two things. One, we're talking about it because it appeared on social media, and because Tucker Carlson is connected to this presidential campaign. He spoke at the Republican convention. The speech at the Republican convention was not the nuttiest Tucker Carlson speech he's delivered in the past couple of years, but it was a speech, and we do know that he was behind the campaign outreach to RFK Jr., who endorsed Trump just the other day. So I'd say it's a fair issue to talk about what Tucker Carlson is doing and saying, because he is an advisor, an unofficial advisor to former President Trump.
A player in the naming of J.D. Vance as the vice president.
And in J.D. Vance, he was influential behind the Vance pick as well. In fact, in my view, the Don Jr. Tucker branch of advisors is actually gaining an influence in since the RNC, since the assassination attempt on Trump's life. I mean, perhaps not.
Tucker Carlson has a more loyal following than Donald Trump. Right, Tucker Carlson very likely is going to be a vice president, possible presidential candidate one day for the Republicans.
Coincidentally, that has been the worst time for Trump in this campaign. is the month since. And I'd say another thing about it, which is striking to me, and I think one of the 87 different newsletters I read mentioned this before this kerfuffle, but Tucker Carlson has huge reach on X, huge reach, but no influence in the broader media world. It's really interesting. And so whereas on Fox, he pulled the largest cable audience on Fox, but it wasn't just he had a big cable audience. It was that what he said really did affect not only Trump, but conservative right-wing elites, conservative House members. It really...
Right. Tucker Carlson's gone down market to get a bigger audience, but as a result, his bigger audience has a lower IQ than the audience he used to attract during his halcyon days, 2016 to 2018.
Really moved politics. I don't think he's doing the same thing by putting up this quack and spreading conspiracy theories on X.
On Monday, in his newsletter, Ben Smith, former media columnist for the New York Times, editor of BuzzFeed, and really a thought not dismissible as some kind of liberal shill. So he does a Monday media newsletter, and he was trying to grapple with this question because he was talking about Tucker, Megyn Kelly, Ben Shapiro, a couple of other people, and he said the audiences, either he or his colleague Max Tanney, I can't remember, said the audiences that guys like Ben and Tucker and people like Megyn are drawing are enormous. Millions of downloads a day of their podcasts, which outstrips what a cable show gets. They're doing better numbers in that sense than a television program is. And you add in their reach on social media, and you add an element, you sort of double that, right, in some fashion. But, said Ben, they don't seem to have any cultural purchase. They're not affecting the major media conversation the way you would expect somebody with this kind of reach or following to have. But I then had an email exchange with him in which I said, you're looking at this through the wrong end of the telescope. They have this audience because the mainstream media ignore ideas on the right and are opening up a gigantic space for alternative voices and people who are willing to express that. Now, before I get to you, Abe, the problem with this is the question of what voices they amplify. Because if they were amplifying, I hate to put it this way, but serious voices, if they had on, I know they're skeptical about Ukraine, but if they had on a Ukrainian freedom fighter every day, or they had on, Itamar Ben-Gvir, like a right-wing settler type in Israel who is very supportive of the war or something like that, in sevens, it's possible that Tucker's influence could be far greater. He is leaning into the fever. He is jumping into the fever swamp. So the question is he going to change America for the worse by moving the Overton window into the fever swamp? Or is he consigning himself to irrelevancy with 1% of the population that is psychotic, along with his historians?
So why is he putting Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro in the same conversation as Tucker? Because Ben Smith is talking about the alternative right-wing media sphere, and that does include Tucker, Megyn, and Ben.
And will believe anything as long as it has a conspiratorial frame. Or are we going to be a different country after all of this kind of is consumed? Because a lot of people are going to be going down the path. This is Tucker's path. It's not.
Right. Tucker is not going to take Americans down a path that they don't want to go. Right. Alex Jones, Ben Shapiro, not going to take Americans down a path they don't want to go. Right. People did not evolve to be gullible.
Ben's path, and it's not Megyn's path. So I don't want to go there. But that's my question. Like, are they going to change us, or have they gone into, or is it, Tucker in particular, gone into a silo in which he will dominate, sort of like Alex Jones or something like that, but won't really have push the national?
Yeah, I don't believe that people evolve to be gullible and will start buying into nonsense. Right, good little piece here from Carolyn Glick 3 days ago.
10 months that preceded October 7th, they fought the government tooth and nail. They brought Israel to the brink of, or actually perhaps into, a civil war, to block the passage of legislation that would have placed limited checks and balances on the power of the judicial system, of the judiciary, of the Supreme Court, which arrogated to itself effectively all executive and legislative powers in Israel by giving itself unlimited oversight over the actions of the government and the Knesset, and the ability to abrogate laws and government policies that it doesn't like, based on nothing more than the personal opinions of self-selected justices of the Supreme Court, who are almost entirely aligned with the radical left of Israel. This is what happened. And so, and the Army's general staff said on a number of occasions that they stood with the justices against the elected government of Israel. And the question is, why are they doing this? Why can't they see the dangers? I think they see the dangers to themselves. I think that's what happened. Last week, retired inspector general, or whatever, he's like the equivalent of a colonel's rank in Israel's police, named Avi Weiss, he's been exposing a lot of the documents, a lot of the data about what happened on October 7th, and about, previously about illegal operations by Israel's legal apparatus against politicians. And what he exposed last week was arguably his most explosive expose to date. Avi Weiss, in an interview with the Tov, a TOV internet channel that does a lot of podcasts, I do a lot of podcasts with them, he told his interviewer that on October 7th, essentially, the reason why it took the reason why the IAF, the Israel Air Force, didn't bomb the Hamas terrorists as they were coming in, or block the cars from leaving Israel with the hostages and killing the terrorists instead, or block the terrorists from returning to Israel, etc., or giving chase to them inside of Gaza, is because the Attorney General Gali Barav Miara told Prime Minister Netanyahu that he didn't have the power to change the rules of engagement, that he didn't have the power to declare war, that only the full government has the power to declare war. And as a result, until the full cabinet was able to come in to convene at 8 o'clock in the evening and declare war, she refused to allow the IDF to change the rules of engagement, to allow the Israel Air Force to operate, and refused to allow the Prime Minister to order them to do that. And so the military advocate general in the Army, they view themselves as subordinate not to the government, but to the Attorney General. And so all the lawyers who showed up on October 7th to direct the fire under law blocked any effective action, particularly of the Air Force, from taking place. And so she personally, and every IDF general that listened to her instead of Netanyahu that day, is responsible for the success of Hamas's operation. I mean, that's the implication. So that's devastating. What he exposed was simply devastating for Herzi Halevi, for...
Okay, that will do